What a great intro. Yay! I love how Spirit works. You just send the musicians kind of the intention where you're going, because you know this is just the stepping off point. We don't know the actual words till we get in here. That's how Spirit works, based on who shows up. So, you have a calling because you're on this earth with a divine purpose to rise to the level of your highest creative possibility, expressing all that you are intellectually, emotionally, psychologically, and physically in order to make the universe a more beautiful place. That's from Marianne Williamson in her book, The Law of Divine Compensation. You're on this earth with a divine purpose. And notice she calls it, you have a calling. A calling is divinely inspired. You have a calling. So going from this, your calling here on this earth to be fully you. I love what Spirit does. Once again, I'm in meditation, and the title Joy, Love, and Reckless Abandon came to me. And I was like, wow, I haven't really thought about the word reckless abandon in a long time. And I want you to think for a moment, when you hear the word reckless, what kind of images does that evoke for you? Does that invoke edgy images that are like, yes, I'm reckless? Or does that invoke, that's irresponsible? That's not okay? Does it evoke pictures of people breaking guitars on stage, or drinking and driving, or going too fast? Or does it evoke pictures of lovers in reckless abandon, embracing, you know, on those cheesy romance novel covers? Okay? So I want to break down the definition of reckless and the definition of abandon so we can put those together, because there were some interesting words that came up that we're going to build off of today to see how you can begin to live your life with a divine purpose. And the lesson today is really being authentic in that, emerging into that. So the word reckless, I love this. My favorite came from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary online. Isn't it cool? You can just Google stuff, meaning, phonetics, anything, it's there. And the word reckless means marked by lack of proper caution, careless of consequences. And I love that word, proper caution. Who determines proper caution? And why do we even need the word proper? Anyway, it just seems like a stifling word. So keep that in mind. Proper caution, careless of consequences. Then you have the definition of abandon. Now, there's the definition where you leave something behind or you give it up, okay? But abandon as a noun is a thorough yielding to natural impulses, especially enthusiasm and exuberance. Right on. Woo! Right? Notice those words. Think of those words. A thorough, okay? This is not just a half, but effort. This is a thorough yielding, giving over to what? Natural impulses, especially enthusiasm and exuberance. So when you mix those two words together, that to me is a powerful combination, because when you're living in reckless abandon, you are living from natural impulses and you don't care about proper caution or the consequences of that. Okay? Now we'll go in more as to what boundaries are and responsibility, okay? I'm not encouraging you all to just, go wild, but maybe I am. So when I was thinking about what holds me back from my authentic self and my joy and the life lessons I've learned in that, and living with reckless abandon, there were three things that came up. There were three messages that I give myself, and these will possibly resound, hopefully, with you as well. And the first one is, the first thing that comes up whenever I have an idea, divinely inspired, that, well, I want to carry out and I want to do it, what will the neighbors think? What will the neighbors think? These neighbors, whoever they are, this committee, what will the neighbors think? My poor mother, when I was in high school, and this was actually a college story, I will tell you. So many of you know I was raised Southern Baptist, and my dad was a deacon, and my mom was a Sunday school teacher. And Southern Baptists don't dance, and they don't drink. But in our house, my dad would put on his records, and we would dance. And my dad's theory about drinking was, well, in the Bible, Jesus had the miracle where he turned the water into wine at a wedding. And he said it was wine, it was not grape juice. And he said, I think if Jesus turned water into wine, we can imbibe every once in a while, you know? So I came home on college break at Christmas time. And I go to the grocery store with my mom. And I said, you know, we're having a few people over on Christmas Eve. I'm going to get a little bit of wine, Mom. I'll treat and, you know, let's get a little bit of wine. So we're in the grocery store, and my mom's like, okay, we can get a little bit of wine. So I put the wine in the cart, okay? So my mom is down the aisle this way. She's pushing the cart with the wine. I'm over here looking for snacks or something. And out of my peripheral vision, I see the cart go whizzing past me with no mother behind it. The cart is sailing past me, wham, hits the meat counter, stops, and is in the middle of the aisle. And my mother is turned this way, like she wants nothing to do with that cart. And I'm like, my mom has gone crazy, and we haven't even opened up the wine. And what I noticed was one of the deacons and his wife from the church was in the grocery store. So my mom's like, hot potato, we got wine. And she got rid of the cart. Now, the thing that was interesting is I recognized this deacon, and I'm thinking to myself, that's one of the deacons that sneaks out after church to smoke behind the church bus. Okay, and I said, you know what, I'm going to own it. I'm going to own that I bought and I'm drinking this wine. So I go over and I get the cart, and I swing it around, and my mother's eyes are like, you are not getting that cart full of the sin juice, right? And so I come up to them, and the interesting thing is I pull up the cart, and I can't even remember which deacon it was now, but I'm like, hi, and they look in the cart, and you know what they said? They said, oh, that wine is really good, especially with turkey. Really? My mom was so worried about what people were going to think at the church if they knew she drank wine every once in a while. What will the neighbors think? What will the neighbors think? And guess what? Most of the time, there are no neighbors that think about you all the time. And I know that's hard because we like to think that we are the total center of the universe, and everything we do, everybody's talking about all the time, right? Most of the time, people are living their lives. They're not saying, well, Eileen did this the other day. They're thinking, how am I going to put food on the table? What are my goals and dreams? Now, the other caveat to that is, though, the people that are going to talk about you, the ones that really do want to mull over what you're doing and can't understand it and think you are reckless, give them some fodder. Give them food. Feed them. Do crazy things. I remember one time, and Karen gave me permission to tell the story, and I know she's not here, so that may be why. Christine, who goes here as well, brought to one of our friends' houses some vintage 1970s dresses that her friend was trying to market and sell. They were these prom dresses and very interesting. And we decided that what we were going to do was we were going to put them on and model them in our cul-de-sac. So we pranced around in these 70s prom dresses in the cul-de-sac modeling them. Now, most of the neighbors were like, oh my goodness. Other neighbors were horrified. But we gave them something to talk about. What are those crazy women doing wearing prom dresses in the middle of the cul-de-sac? Give them a little fire. Give them a little fodder. Make their life a little more lively, okay? So that's the first thing. Sometimes when we think we're acting so reckless and there's all these people judging us, they're really not. They're really not. Ernest Holmes says the divine has not incarnated in anyone else in just the same individual way that it has in me. I am unique and forever individualized. Therefore, I do not need to imitate anyone or to long for the good that belongs to another. You are an individual. You are an individual. And you can act with reckless abandon because God is directing you where to go. Okay? God is directing you. And the thing I would say to what will the neighbors think? Well, it's not really their business. And remember that saying, it's not really your business what the neighbors think anyway. It's not. It's God's business. You're God's business. The other thing that gets into my mind, besides what will the neighbors think, is God forbid that someone thinks I'm irresponsible. How many of you grew up with your parents, that's not the responsible thing to do. That'll be irresponsible if you do that. Especially me, it was always, that is so irresponsible. I know that, many moons ago, my husband and I were on a snowmobiling tour before we had kids. And we met this really cool snowmobiling guide. And during our lunch break, we were talking to him, and I was like, how did you end up doing this? This is so wonderful. And what do you do in the summers? And he said, oh, I love my life. I do snowmobiling in the winter, and I do whitewater rafting guide in the summer. And I said, oh, how did you end up doing that? And he said, I had a job in San Diego, powerful job. And I was in this office building looking out at the ocean, and I was so unhappy. But I felt like it was the responsible thing to do. I had all this education. I was making all this money. I had to be responsible. I had obligations. And he contacted a friend. He told him he was miserable. And his friend said, hey, you like the outdoors? Think about this. Wow. He gave it all up for that lifestyle. And his family and everyone thought he was crazy and he was irresponsible. That he threw away his education, that he gave it up. Well, your education and your training, that teaches you also what you don't want to do, not just what you want to do. You can't be afraid to try something or go in a different direction because it seems irresponsible. Oh, I'm throwing away all my education. There's no way you can clear your mind of all the terrible things those professors and teachers taught you. There's no way. You can't throw away your education. It's in there. What you were supposed to know is in there. You're not throwing it away by taking a different direction. It's not a waste of money to invest in you. So sometimes you don't have to do what is proper. And responsible, in that word is the word responsive. So your responsibilities come from how you respond to what God has in store for you. Can I get an amen on that? In store for you, responsive. And from that, what you're responsive to is where your obligations come from. You don't need everyone else to tell you what your responsibilities and obligations are. They're in your heart and God knows, and God dictates that to you. Because you are what? You have a divine purpose to rise with your creativity. That's yours individual. Even though we're all united in the one, that's your own individual creation. I love this. Dr. Don Chatfield writes, you are living an authentic life when you have a sparkle in your eye, joy in your heart, and you would rather be doing nothing else. Think about that. Think about how that would feel. Dare to think about that. Dare to think about that. And in the Bible, there's a great verse in Jeremiah that talks about, I knew you in the womb and I had great plans for you. You're not an accident. You're not an accident. You're not an afterthought. You're a divine creation. Divine creation. Now, the other thing I would say, there are, and I will admit this, there are certain obligations you can't get around. They're legal. Unless you want a life of crime, which I am not advocating. Reckless abandon does not necessarily mean life of crime. It can, but we don't need to do that. When you have an obligation, something you have to do, like pay your taxes or buy groceries is one of my big ones. Be grateful. Come from that place of gratitude that you're here to do that and have fun with it. Have fun with it. Be a little naughty. Do things that feel like you're beating the system a little bit. Like when my husband Spencer and I, we do the taxes. I'm into my civic duty, but I don't necessarily know that always the people who get my money are good stewards of it. But you have to give that up. You have this obligation. What we do is we'll drink a margarita or a beer and we'll do our taxes. And so far that's turned out really great. And then we haven't been audited, so we'll see what happens. But then we give the tax folders really awful names. And I can't even repeat some of the names, but it makes us feel like, yeah, look at us. So naughty to name the taxes that, we stick it in the folder. Like choke on that government or whatever, right? So make it fun. Your obligations, make them fun. Because when you get in the drudgery, you're forgetting that you're here with a divine purpose to rise to the level of your highest creative possibility. So on that, the whole irresponsible thing is no one else defines your responsibilities and your obligations except for you and God. You're a team. God's with you, correct? God's in you. You're united. You define it. Not the neighbors, not the deacon at the store. You define your responsibilities and your obligations. Now, the third message that I give myself when I'm trying to expand or live life joyously and with love and reckless abandon is, I've been there, I've done that, I know that. I know it. I know that path, I've done that. How limiting is that? And how many times do we do that? We cut ourselves off from our joy because somebody will start talking about something and we'll glaze over because it's, I've been there, I know that, I've done that. Wow, really? Every single aspect of it? Nobody can ever offer you any new knowledge on it? I love my children because my children, I love the way they'll go, Mom, listen, it doesn't have to be that way, Mom. And then I'll get kind of stubborn and I'll be like, well, of course I'm the mom. I know what's proper, you know? And then sometimes I'll turn around and go, oh, okay, yeah, I guess it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. Thinking with that young mind. That's that part, remember in the definition of abandon, thoroughly yielding, okay? Thoroughly yield to new knowledge and new opportunities, not saying that you have it all, you know it all. Suzuki Roshi has this wonderful saying, and Suzuki Roshi said, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. And I would even say in the child's mind, there are many possibilities. In the adult mind, there are few. Isn't that wonderful? When you become an expert at all, that takes away from your joy and from your expanding, from your going on. My father is a really playful guy, but he puts a lot of limits on himself. And when I was younger, he had a dream that he wanted to sail to Australia. He loved the ocean. And me in my young naivete would say, well, why not? Why don't you? Well, you can't do that. I mean, that's not the way it's done. And so finally I started asking more questions. Well, Dad, if this is a dream of your heart, what can we do for you to get the dreams of your heart? Why not? And it came down to, well, we're not wealthy enough for me to do that. Well, why not? Why can't we save money to do it? And his belief was that he knew it all and that there was no way for him to be wealthy and be responsible, that wealthy people were irresponsible and they cheated people. He knew that. So in his mind, he didn't listen to any input from anybody else on ways that he could do it, on ways that he could achieve his dream. He shut that dream down because he knew it. He knew it all. He knew the path. This was the way it was. This was his lot in life. And that still to this day makes me sad because you know what I would really love to do? I'd really love to take my 80-year-old dad to Australia. And even though I'm terrified of boats, I'll take some Xanax and sail with him. You know, cutting out those possibilities in your mind and in your heart. Because we fail to realize that principle is not bound by precedent. Principle is not bound by precedent, by what's come before. We limit our faith to that which has already been accomplished, and few miracles result. Miracles result. And when we're talking miracles, it doesn't necessarily mean that Jesus comes down from heaven and lifts your bus. Woo! Puts it over here. We're talking miracles in your life. Things happening to you that you never realized were possible. You are the conduit for the miracle. You are the conduit. You have to give over that reckless abandon, that carefree attitude. You don't care of the consequences. You're connected to God, and you understand that principle is not bound by precedent. Each moment is a new moment to be lived. It's a moment of renewal, each and every moment. Each moment is a new possibility. In the Bible it says, behold, I make all things new. All things new. So, with each moment being a new possibility, and if you've given up what the neighbors think, or you're at least going to give them a good show, and you let God dictate to you in your spirit what you need to be responsible for, responsive to, what your obligations are, you can live a life of reckless abandon. Do you want to live a life of reckless abandon? Thoroughly giving over to what? Enthusiasm and exuberance? I do. I want to be reckless. I don't want to be tied to somebody else's vision of what is proper, What a crazy word. Do we really need that word? Do we? Proper. It sounds like property, like you're owned by someone. So the final thing I want to share with you today is, if you can put up the picture, Eric. Last weekend, I went to see my grandniece's baptism in Tulsa. And I'm going to tell you right now, this little girl, with abandon, gave herself over to her faith and made the decision to get baptized, and she understood what she was doing. And then this is at her baptism luncheon afterwards. And you know what this little girl was doing? With grandparents there and everything. She put on her Wonder Woman cape and her swim goggles and was chasing my boys around, pretending she was shooting them with lasers out of her swim goggles. With such joy and with such carefree, reckless abandon, not caring that if anybody there was thinking, oh, it's her baptism party, which thank goodness nobody was. Her parents gave her that freedom. But this picture reminds me that every once in a while you got to put on your goggles and your Wonder Woman cape. And if you're a dude, you can put on your Superman cape. And just go for it. Just go for it and live with that. Live with that. Be in that space. Be authentic. Live with love, joy, and reckless abandon. I want to close with a Shel Silverstein poem that talks kind of about being proper. And Shel Silverstein, if you don't know, is a author that wrote poetry for children, and I really think he touches on that living life to that depth and that wonder. The poem is called I'm Making a List. I'm making a list of the things I must say for politeness and goodness and kindness and gentleness, sweetness and rightness. Hello, pardon me, how are you? Excuse me, bless you, may I, thank you, goodbye. If you know some that I forgot, please stick them in your eye. So let us pray.